Are your bylaws and standing rules kind of a hot mess and not working for your PTO or PTA school parent group? Yeah, that's such a common issue. If we haven't yet met, I'm Christina Heideck. I'm a PTO and family engagement expert, and also I'm a recovering attorney, and I really like to talk about all things nerdy, including bylaws and standing rules. So that's exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's video, because I have so many groups who come to me and my group isn't working. And I'm like, well, what do your bylaws say? Or what do your standing rules say? And then I hear crickets. So let's talk about why they are not working and why people are not using them, because yeah, that's such a huge issue. So the first thing is that you might be repeating, let me back up before I even get into that point. Your bylaws and standing rules might be a disorganized hot mess. And when they are disorganized, that means that they're hard to understand. And if they're hard to understand, people are not going to use them. People are not going to reference them. They're not going to follow them. And that is the exact opposite of what you want to happen. If you are new to the PTO world or PTA world and don't have an understanding of what bylaws and standing rules are, I have a really fabulous video that talks about, basically gives like a primer on exactly what they are, like a really good explanation. So I will link that above so you can go ahead and pop over and watch that when you're done with this one, or if you get tired of hearing me, whatever, if you get bored, you can go pop over and watch that one, because that's a really good explanation about what they are and why they're so important. Okay, so anyway, if they're a hot mess, people are not going to be reading them or following them. The other thing I see, and it's kind of related, is if there's a repetition of things in the bylaws and also the standing rules. You don't have to do that. In fact, it makes them less effective, because the longer bylaws and standing rules is not the goal. In fact, I would argue that shorter bylaws and standing rules are the goal. It needs to be just what it needs to be. You're not trying to write a novella here. When there are more words on a page, it makes it more difficult to understand. And this is kind of tied to my next thing too. A lot of people use fancy words, like really big words, like legalese or heretofore and wherefore and therefore and alas. And I can't even think. Nobody uses alas in bylaws and standing rules. It just popped into my head. Anyway, you understand what I'm saying. Big words, multi-syllabic words is what people are using, usually what they like to use, because I think people felt like that the bylaws and standing rules weren't really official unless super fancy words were used. Now, I'm not saying use slang, but just break it down. You can say next, instead of moreover, or something like that. That's probably not the best example, but I'm hoping you're picking up what I'm putting down. The basic issue is that I think the average reading ability is like in the 7th grade. So if a 7th grader could not read your bylaws and standing rules and understand what they mean, then that's a big problem. So you really need to break it down and make it more simple and just say what you need it to say. And don't try and make it fancy like that. Again, not more official. It just makes it easier to ignore. All right. The next reason that your bylaws and standing rules aren't working for you is because you're setting them and then forgetting them. So you're maybe taking the time to go through and update them. PTA will make their units update their bylaws every year, every 3 years, something like, well, it's standing rules every year. You should really be looking at it. And bylaws are like every 2 to 3 years. That is a checklist thing that they ask you to do to be in compliance with the standards of affiliation. But when I say people, PTO members are going through and updating the bylaws, but then they're not necessarily using them. They're not distributing the copies to their leaders and their members so that they can reference them. So I'm a big proponent of all things environmental, but this is a case when I think you got to bust out the printer paper and make some copies for people, because if the bylaws and standing rules are not in their hot little hands, they're probably not going to take the time to go and find them. Again, I'm a recovering attorney. I am used to referencing outside resources like that. Most people, that's not the case. So they're not going to be tracking them down. They'll just be like, oh, I didn't know anything about it. So you need to be getting them in their hands. And that's why, one of the reasons why I always say you need to have a physical binder for people, so that there's no question about what resources they have. They have it right there in front of them. The next thing is that, this is again tied to the setting and forgetting it, because Some people are just ignoring the bylaws altogether. So you need to start referencing them in your meetings and make sure when you are transitioning from one officer to another that you're saying, hey, here are the updated bylaws and standing rules. I've put a copy in the binder for you, just like I mentioned, so that they know they exist. You need to be talking about them more. You need to be referencing them when you are going to make a decision about something. For example, we have this one, my units are all PTAs, and so we have an annual Founders Day celebration, and there used to be a paid ticketed event because it was like a sit-down dinner sort of thing. And so in our bylaws, it would say who the PTA paid for. The president, teacher liaison, I think maybe definitely the principal, the award recipients, and maybe the council delegate. And then everybody else had to pay for their own ticket if they wanted to attend. And it was like 10 or 15 bucks. It wasn't a big cost. Every year, we'd be like, now, who are we sending? Who are we paying? Because it's only an event that happens once a year. And if you have a different treasurer every year, if you have a different president, there's the natural turnover of people they might not remember. Every year we had to go back and reference those bylaws to see who we were supposed to be paying for. It had already been figured out. We just had to go and follow what had already been figured out. And that's like really one of the biggest benefits of the bylaws and standing rules is that the problems that you might be having may have already been, like the solutions may have already been figured out and the procedures laid out in the bylaws and standing rules. Use them. Don't ignore them. If they are not working for you, because I had this question this summer. Someone said, well, like we just don't have quorum, so we can't do anything. So we're not really following the bylaws. Well, dude, adjust your quorum. That's what one of my groups had to do because participation had declined and there just wasn't the same amount of people involved. And so we had to be realistic. Like it's not going to go back to that. We'd been failing to meet quorum for like 3 years. And I was like, this is crazy. We need to like adjust this. It's not a bad thing to adjust your quorum to meet reality so that you are doing things in the proper way. Like the whole purpose of a quorum is to make sure that a majority of the members understand and agree with the decisions being made, right? So you don't have a small minority of people deciding what the group should be doing. If you need help with this, I have put together a template and a whole kit that walks through the exact process of writing your bylaws and standing rules for the first time or updating them for like the 15th time. No matter where you are in the process, you can use this kit to make your life easier. It's called the Bylaws and Standing Rules Made Simple because this is such a headache task that people put off doing. They just don't want to deal with it because they think it's going to be so overwhelming and it's going to be time consuming. And I've made it so simple with this resource. So go ahead and check that resource out. I will drop a link to it in the description below. You can totally check that out. And then next, if you're looking for more nerdy talk about bylaws, I would totally suggest watching How to Unlock Your PTO's Success. There are 5 secrets to really powerful bylaws that I think you should check out. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video and join me for the next one.